I sat where the sound didn't ask me anything. The room was still doing its job. A chair, a light, the edge of the table. Nothing needed to change. I stayed with the same small breath. Didn't deepen it, didn't fix it. Just enough air to remain here. Just enough quiet to stay. Nothing was missing. Nothing was missing. Nothing was missing from this moment. Nothing was missing. The clock kept going without pressure. I didn't follow it with my eyes. Time moved like it knew me already and didn't need permission. I heard my own breath arrive and leave like it always had. No effort, no meaning added, just the sound of being here. Nothing was missing. Nothing was missing. Nothing was missing from this moment. Nothing was missing. I didn't check the door, didn't wait for a sign. If something was supposed to happen, it knew where to find me. The floor felt steady under nothing special. The walls held their distance. I didn't lean on anything, I didn't fall either. Nothing was missing. Nothing was missing. Nothing was missing from this moment. Nothing was missing. The thought came in and left again without asking me to follow. I let it go the same way it arrived without correcting it. The air stayed warm enough, the silence stayed useful. I didn't look for comfort, it was already there. Nothing was missing. Nothing was missing. Nothing was missing from this moment. Nothing was missing. I stayed long enough to notice nothing was pulling at me. No ache, no urgency, just the weight of being still. I sat through the whole minute without measuring it. Let it pass at its own speed like it always wanted. Nothing was missing. Nothing was missing. Nothing was missing from this moment. Nothing was missing. If something else existed somewhere, it didn't belong here. This place was already complete without trying to be. I didn't add a word, I didn't take one back. Everything stayed exactly where it was. Nothing was missing. Nothing was missing. Nothing was missing. Nothing was missing from this moment. Nothing was missing. I stayed until the quiet proved it. Stayed until I believed it. Stayed until there was no question left about staying. Nothing was missing. 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 I stayed where the sound didn't shift, didn't lean forward, didn't step away, just enough stillness to keep the shade. The room kept breathing on its own walls, didn't ask me to explain. I watched the minute open slowly, then close again. I stayed until it passed. I stayed until it passed. Didn't push the moment through. I stayed until it passed. The light changed without warning, not brighter, not less, just a different angle on the same quiet. I didn't follow the feeling, didn't name it either. Let it sit where it landed, like it knew the place. I stayed until it passed. I stayed until it passed. Didn't hurry the silence. I stayed until it passed. A thought arrived without weight, no edge, no demand. I didn't hold it long enough to turn it into something else. The chair stayed warm under me, the floor stayed patient. Nothing leaned in, nothing left. I stayed until it passed. I stayed until it passed. Let the moment finish itself. I stayed until it passed. The air moved slow and ordinary, like it always had. I matched my breathing, nothing, and nothing matched back. No signal in the room, no direction given, just the sound of time moving without me. I stayed until it passed. I stayed until it passed. No effort in staying. I stayed until it passed. The clock didn't look at me, didn't remind me where I was. Time felt wide enough to not be counted. I felt my hands stay still without holding anything. Felt my shoulders drop without being told. I stayed until it passed. I stayed until it passed. Didn't rush the ending. I stayed until it passed. A memory tried to open, I didn't follow it. Let it close on its own like a door without sound. The quiet didn't break, didn't deepen, just stayed useful, just stayed here. I stayed until it passed. I stayed until it passed. The moment didn't need me. I stayed until it passed. Minutes stacked without pressure, one after another. I didn't step between them, let them decide the pace. Nothing asked me to move, nothing asked me to feel. Let the space keep working without interference. I stayed until it passed. I stayed until it passed. No resistance in me. I stayed until it passed. The move, the sound of my breathing stayed low, stayed even. Not dramatic, not careful. I didn't wait for relief, didn't expect clarity. Let the time do what it does when left alone. I stayed until it passed. I stayed until it passed. No need to understand it. I stayed until it passed. When it finally moved on, it didn't announce itself, just left the same way it came, quietly. I stayed after it ended, just to be sure. Nothing followed, nothing needed to. I stayed until it passed. I stayed until it passed. And when it was gone, I stayed. I stayed until it passed. I stayed, I stayed, I stayed, I stayed until it passed. signal in the room, no blinking light, no sound, nothing asking for attention, nothing breaking the ground. The phone stayed face down like it understood the deal. No updates coming through, no reason to react or feel. No signal, no panic, no reaching for the edge. I didn't need a warning, I didn't need a ledge. The air stayed steady, didn't tighten or rush. Silence held its shape without needing a push. No signal, no panic, no noise to outrun. The moment stayed open like it wasn't done. I didn't check the time, didn't count what passed. Let the seconds fall behind me, let them move fast or last. The room didn't lean in, didn't ask me to stay. Just let me exist in the middle of the day. No signal, no panic, no pull in my chest. Nothing trying to prove that this wasn't enough yet. A thought tried to surface, then drifted back down. I didn't follow it, didn't give it a crown. The wall stayed neutral, the floor stayed wide. Nothing on either side, trying to decide. No signal, no panic, no question to solve. I let the quiet sit without needing to evolve. The light stayed even, didn't flicker or fade, like it knew exactly how much space to give. No signal, no panic, no words to explain. The moment didn't pressure me to turn into change. I stayed where I was, not frozen, not stuck, just present enough to not call it luck. Breathing came natural, didn't need a guide, in and out like it always tried. No signal, no panic, no edge in the sound. Nothing lost its balance, nothing needed to be found. The clock kept moving, but I didn't check. Let time do its work without earning respect. No signal, no panic, no countdown inside. The seconds didn't matter when I didn't fight. A memory passed through, didn't stop to speak. Just nodded once, then went back to sleep. Ooh. No signal, no panic, no reason to chase. I let the thought go before it took shape. The room stayed honest without mood or tone. Didn't try to comfort me, didn't leave me alone. No signal, no panic, no comfort required. The quiet didn't promise anything higher. I noticed my shoulders drop without thought, like they were tired of holding knots. No signal, no panic, no release to perform. The calm wasn't special, just steady and warm. I didn't wait for meaning, didn't frame a scene. Let it stay unfinished, let it stay clean. No signal, no panic, no aftermath. The moment didn't ask if it would last. The sound of nothing stayed useful and clear, like it knew exactly why I was here. No signal, no panic, no message delayed. Everything important already stayed. When the signal returns, it can do what it does. I won't meet it halfway, I won't rush. No signal, no panic, no need to prepare. I stayed where I was, and nothing broke there. I stayed, no signal, no panic, no panic, no panic, no stay, no panic, just stay. I didn't check the time, know where to start. Now halfway through, now it slowed. The moment didn't introduce itself. It didn't need a name, it just opened and stayed open. I didn't check the time. The chair held me evenly, no shift in weight, no reminder that I should move. The room stayed ordinary in a way that worked. Nothing waiting, nothing finished. I didn't check the time. There was a sound outside, not loud enough to fall, not clear enough to wait more. It passed on its own. I stayed where it left me without tracking it, without asking where it went. I didn't check the time. My breathing settled, not because I tried, but because nothing asked it to hurry. In and out at a place that didn't belong to a clock. I didn't check the time. I noticed how often I look just to feel anchored, just to know where I spend this time. I let the moment hold itself without proof. I didn't check the time. If I'd arrived and left without explanation, without tension, I didn't hold it long enough to turn it into something else. I didn't check the time. I thought arrived and left without explanation, without tension. I didn't hold it long enough to turn it into something else. I didn't check. There's a habit of measuring quiet to see if it's useful, to see if it's earned. This one didn't meet that. It stayed valid without being counted or proved. I didn't check the time. The clock stayed somewhere else doing its job without reporting back to me. I let it keep going without supervision, without acknowledgement, without friction. I didn't check the time. Minutes passed, they didn't stack. They spread out like a flat surface. No edges, no crushing, no sins to be hide. I didn't check the time. I stayed in the middle of the sound. I leaned it forward, not holding back. The song didn't time, it didn't fall, it stayed. standing and didn't. The thought ended before the movement began. Nothing felt incomplete, nothing waited for a better moment to arrive. Did it change? There stayed warm enough, the silence stayed useful. The stays didn't close or open, everything stayed at the same height for longer than expected. I didn't. There was no marker for when it changed, only a sense of being there without arrival, without departure, without a line to cross. I didn't change the time. I stayed long enough that it stopped mattering whether I'd stayed long enough. That was the point, not noticing when the moment became mine. I didn't check the time when I finally moved. It wasn't because I should, it was because the moment had ended. Not loudly, not clearly, just quietly finished. I didn't check the time and nothing slipped past me because of it, nothing else. It was enough like this. Before I added anything, the room already knew how to hold the moment. I didn't need a reason to stay where I was. Nothing asked for proof, nothing leaned forward. It was enough like this. The light didn't try harder, the sound didn't rise, everything stayed at the same height. I noticed my hand still open, not reaching, not pulling back. It was enough like this. I've been taught to adjust, to improve, to move something forward. This time I didn't. The minute worked without my input. It was enough like this. The chair didn't correct me, the floor didn't shift, no signal arrived to change the posture. I stayed, not out of discipline, out of agreement with the moment. It was enough like this. I remembered how often I had weighed extra words, extra meaning, as if quiet needs permission. This one didn't. It was enough like this. The air stayed usable, the silence stayed clear. No pressure in it, no demand, just space, doing what space does. It was enough like this. I didn't lower my voice, it was already low. Didn't slow my breathing, it was already being. Nothing had to be fixed to be complete. It was enough like this. A thought passed through without stopping. It didn't knock, didn't wait, I let it go the same way it came. It was enough like this. The clock stayed elsewhere doing its own work. I didn't need to meet it halfway. Time didn't hurry when I didn't. It was enough like this. I've mistaken effort for value before, confused movement with meaning. This moment corrected nothing and still held weight. It was enough like this. No chorus arrived early, no line tried to stand out. Everything stayed level, like it trusted itself. I stayed with it longer than usual. It was enough like this. I didn't try to feel calm, I didn't try to feel anything. The absence of effort did the work for me. That surprised me more than it should have. It was enough like this. The room didn't perform, the sound didn't build. Nothing was preparing to become something else. It stayed, and that was the point. It was enough like this. I don't sing loud, I stay. The song understood that without changing shape, without asking me to explain myself. It was enough like this. I stayed through the middle where nothing happens, where songs usually hurry to leave. This one didn't, and neither did I. It was enough like this. When the end approached, it didn't announce itself. It arrived at the same pace as everything else in the room. It was enough like this. After the sound stopped, I didn't move right away, not to honor it, not to hold it, just because there wasn't no reason to. It was enough like this. Nothing followed, nothing was missing. No summary required, no conclusion drawn. The moment stayed intact because I didn't touch it. It was enough like this. I stayed until staying felt unnecessary. Then I moved without regret, without relief, without change. It was enough like this. From the first second to the last, and it didn't need anything more. It was enough like this. I sat without reaching, not for the table, not for the thought, not for the sound. My hands stayed open, not empty, just unused, like they understood the moment. I sat without reaching. The room didn't invite me, didn't hold anything out. Stayed neutral and I stayed with it. There was space to move, I didn't take it. There was time to speak, I didn't fill it. I sat without reaching. I noticed how often I lean without meaning to towards something that hasn't asked. This time I stayed back, not guarded, not careful, just present. I sat without reaching. The chair held its shape, the floor didn't shift. Nothing adjusted itself to accommodate me, and that felt right, like I wasn't interrupting anything important by being here. I sat without reaching. A sound passed somewhere nearby, not close enough to respond to, not distant enough to ignore. I let it pass the same way it came, without tracking it, without wondering. I sat without reaching. There's a habit of closing gaps, of making contact, of proving attention with movement. I didn't follow it, I let the gap stay open, let the distance keep its size. I sat without reaching. My breathing stayed quiet, not controlled, not counted, just steady enough. It didn't try to calm me, didn't try to focus me, it just kept working in the background. I sat without reaching. The light didn't change much, just enough to stay real. It didn't point at anything, didn't suggest direction. I stayed where I was, now waiting, not deciding, just staying. I sat without reaching. A thought formed slowly, then stopped forming before it became useful, before it became loud. I didn't chase it, I let it dissolve like it hadn't finished arriving yet. I sat without reaching. Time moved at a flat angle, not rising, not falling, just moving across. I didn't measure it, didn't check progress, let it move without my help. I sat without reaching. I've learned how reaching can look like listening, how movement can pretend to be care. This time I didn't perform that, I let stillness do its own work. I sat without reaching, nothing drifted away, nothing closed in the space held without effort. That surprised me more than it should have, how little was required to keep it intact. I sat without reaching, there was no reward for staying still, no signal that I chose right or avoided something. The moment didn't comment, it just stayed usable from 1 second to the next. I sat without reaching, the middle lasted longer than expected, long enough to forget there was an end. I didn't rush to find it, I didn't look ahead, I stayed inside what was already here. I sat without reaching, nothing drifted away, nothing closed in the space held without effort. That surprised me more than it should have, how little was required to keep it intact. I sat without reaching, there was no reward for staying still, no signal that I chose right or avoided something. The moment didn't comment, it just stayed usable from 1 second to the next. I sat without reaching, nothing drifted away, nothing closed in the space held without effort. That surprised me more than it should have, how little was required to keep it intact. I sat without reaching, there was no reward for staying still, no signal that I chose right or avoided something. The moment didn't comment, it just stayed usable from 1 second to the next. I sat without reaching, the middle lasted longer than expected, long enough to forget there was an end. I didn't rush to find it, I didn't look ahead, I stayed inside what was already here. I sat without reaching, I don't sing loud, I stay. The sound stayed low with me, didn't climb, didn't fall, didn't try to resolve. I sat without reaching, when something shifted, it did so quietly without asking me to follow. I noticed it late, not because I missed it, but because it didn't ask for attention. I sat without reaching, eventually the moment began to loosen, not break, not disappear, just open enough to step out of without effort, without hesitation. I stayed a second longer, not to hold it, not to mark it, just because I could. I sat without reaching, when I finally moved, nothing collapsed, nothing chased me, nothing stayed behind. The space closed on its own cleanly, without residue. I sat without reaching, from the first sound to the last, and that was the whole point. No one needed more, not the room, not the sound, not me. Everything was already placed before I noticed it. No one needed more. The chair didn't ask for comfort, the light didn't try to help. Nothing adjusted itself to be easier. No one needed more. I've seen moments ask for attention, this one didn't stay complete without being seen. No one needed more. The air stayed where it was, not warmer, not colder, just usable. I breathe without checking if it was enough. No one needed more. There was time available, I noticed how often I had extra movement, extra meaning, extra proof. This time I didn't. No one needed more. No one needed more. No one needed more. The sound didn't grow, didn't prepare, didn't suggest a peak, a stay level. No one needed more. I stayed in the middle where nothing happens, where songs usually leave too early. This one stayed and I stayed with it. No one needed more. A thought up here, then settled back without finishing itself, without pressure. The room held its balance without leaning on me, without asking if I was ready. No one needed more. I felt the habit of wanting something next, something clearer, something louder. I let it pass without following. No one needed more. The light stayed consistent, not symbolic, not dramatic, just there. More. Time moved across the floor without stacking, without urgency, without shape. No one needed more. I didn't search for meaning, I didn't frame the moment. I let it stay unclaimed and it worked. No one needed more. There's a relief in not improving, and not completing, and not fixing. This moment knew that before I did. No one needed more. The sound didn't insist, didn't ask me to feel, didn't wait for a response. It trusted itself. No one needed more. I noticed my hands still open, still empty, still fine. I don't sing loud, I stay. The song accepted that without changing shape, without pulling away. No one needed more. The middle lasted longer than expected, long enough to feel stable. No one needed more. There's a relief in not improving, and not completing, and not fixing. This moment knew that before I did. No one needed more. The sound didn't insist, didn't ask me to feel, didn't wait for a response. It trusted itself. No one needed more. I noticed my hands still open, still empty, still fine. I don't sing loud, I stay. The song accepted that without changing shape, without pulling away. Lasted longer than expected, long enough to feel stable. No one needed more. Nothing arrived late, nothing left early. Everything stayed at the same height. No one needed more. When the end approached, it didn't rush, it didn't soften, it didn't explain. No one needed more. Right after the sound stopped, I stayed seated, not to hold it, not to honor it, just because there was no reason to move. No one needed more. Nothing followed, nothing was missing, nothing else to be added. No one needed more. From the first second to the last, and that was enough. The room held still before I noticed it. No shift in the corners, no sound leaning forward. The room held still, and I matched it. I didn't lower my voice. no voice to lower. The air already knew how to stay in place. The room held still, the chair didn't react when I sat down. The floor didn't register my weight as an event. The room held still. Light stayed where it landed, not brighter, not dimmer, just present. I didn't follow it with my eyes. The room held still. There was a sound somewhere outside the room, not close enough to matter. It passed without consequence. The room held still. I noticed my shoulders had dropped earlier without instruction, without reason. Room held still. Time didn't arrive in pieces. It came as a surface, flat, wide, uninterrupted. The room held still. I've been in rooms that asked things of me. This one didn't. It stayed neutral and that was enough. The room held still. My hand stayed open, not waiting, not deciding. The room responded, didn't need to. The room held still. I thought about moving and didn't. The thought ended before movement began. The room held still. Nothing was being measured, nothing was being judged. The silence wasn't heavy, it was accurate. The room held still. Breathing came and went at its own length. I didn't follow it, it didn't lead. The room held still. I remember places that felt unfinished. This wasn't one of them. The room held still. The walls kept their distance, didn't close in, didn't widen. They stayed where they were built. The room held still. I noticed how rare that is, how often rooms shift when people enter. This one didn't. The room held still. There was no moment asking to be marked, no peak, no cue, no emphasis. Though I stayed in the middle of the sound, not at the start, not at the end. The room held still. I don't sing loud, I stay. The room accepted that without changing shape. The room held still. Minutes passed without stacking. They spread instead of piling up. The room held still. I didn't look for meaning, didn't frame the silence. It didn't need context to function. The room held still. A memory drifted through, didn't stop, didn't open. It left the way it arrived. The room held still. I stayed longer than usual, not to test it, just because nothing ended. The room held still. When the sound thinned, it didn't disappear. It stayed usable even as it faded. The room held still. I noticed the absence of urgency. Nothing pushed, nothing pulled. The room held still. There's comfort in a space that doesn't react, that doesn't reflect you back at yourself. The room held still. I stayed seated after the last sound, not to honor it, not to hold it, just because the room hadn't changed. The room held still. When I finally stood, nothing shifted. The chair stayed, the light stayed, the room held still. I left it the same way I found it, unaltered, unimpressed. The room held still, and somewhere Not because I couldn't, because it fit better that way. The room didn't ask, the silence didn't wait. Nothing leaned forward to be clarified. I left it unexplained. There was a sentence forming. I let it stop midway where it still worked. Not every thought needs to finish itself. Some carry more weight when they don't. I left it unexplained. The lights stay consistent across the same surfaces. No emphasis, no underline. I didn't add context, I didn't frame it. I let the moment hold its own shape. I left it unexplained. A question passed through without landing. I watched it move and kept still. It didn't return, it didn't insist. It accepted the distance. I left it unexplained. I've learned how quickly explanation turns into noise, how easily clarity crowds a room. This time I chose space over certainty, over polish. I left it unexplained. The sound stayed low like it trusted restraint. No rise, no drop. It didn't need a reason to continue. It continued because it could. I left it unexplained. My hands stayed open, not signaling, not offering, just present. There was nothing to point at, nothing to name, nothing to fix by saying more. I left explained. Time moved evenly without cues, without markers, without commentary. I didn't check where we were in it. I didn't measure how far it had gone. I'll explain. I left it unexplained. The memory surfaced, then softened before becoming a story. I let it blur, I let it pass, I let it stay unfinished. I left it unexplained. The room stayed neutral, not supportive, not resistant, just there. That neutrality did more than explanation ever does. I left it unexplained. I noticed the urge to summarize, to make it useful, to close the loop. I didn't follow it, I stayed where the loop never formed. I left it unexplained. There's a calm in not concluding, and letting a thing remain itself without title, without instruction, without proof of meaning. I let it explain. I don't sing loud, I stay, the sound accepted that without changing shape, without asking for resolution. I left it unexplained. The middle lasted long enough to forget. There was an end that felt honest, that felt clean, that felt like a point. I left it unexplained. No one asked after, no one followed up, nothing came loose because of it. The silence stayed useful, the space stayed open, the moment stayed intact. I left it unexplained. When the end approached, it didn't announce itself. It arrived at the same height as everything else in the room. No emphasis, no release. I left it unexplained. After the sound stopped, I didn't move right away. Not to hold it, not to respect it, just because nothing told me to, just because staying still worked. I left it unexplained. Nothing followed, nothing was missing, nothing needed a final word. I stood up when it felt done, not because it was clear, but because it was complete. I left it unexplained and it stayed with me long, because of that.